everyone, I'm Liz Hunt.
And I'm Chelsea Poppens.
And this is the Agency Rocket Show, where we talk about the chaos of running a creative agency.
Woo! And today we are going to be continuing off our last podcast around managing our team. We didn't get to the budget portion of it, so this one is managing our budget. Really excited to talk about what the journey. You're like really excited to talk about budgeting and financing.
Really? Are you excited though?
super stoked to be here today talking to you about managing budget so that our company can make money.
Yeah, so good. Just the best topic ever.
Yeah, it really does go hand in hand with managing the team and all the intricacies of running an agency and being successful in your agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it goes back to, we're talking about DayCloud and our agency. Liz, you are the OG of DayCloud. I would love to hear what DayCloud started at, as far as managing budget, what that looked like in the beginning versus what it looks like now, because I'm only seeing a brief period in time of DayCloud as an agency and what that looks like.
So basically how I started the company was 2 huge clients, and I started it as a freelancer, essentially, and hired a couple of people as a freelancer, and then kind of ended up accidentally starting an agency. And that's like a story for another day. But essentially what we did is, for the first, I think like 4 or 5 years of DayCloud, we did everything hourly. Honestly, we just had this like incredible relationship with these 2 companies. They just gave us tons and tons of hourly work, and we were essentially their in-house team. And so for the first several years of owning DayCloud, I never had to worry about a budget. I never had to think about it. And that was a massive, massive luxury. Incredibly fortunate. We just did whatever hours were needed for a project.
Did what we wanted.
Well, I mean, we never ever did what we wanted. It wasn't like that, but we just billed the hours that we worked and we got paid. It was what it was. And whether that was $15,000 a month, the client just paid that. Learning how to budget for projects was something that we did not have to do early on when starting the agency, because we just didn't have any clients that we were doing lump sum pricing for. And so it's a tough lesson to learn when you're not used to it, running an agency, and then all of a sudden you are starting projects that are not like that. And you're like, oh shoot, this is not how the rest of the world works. This is not how most projects work. And people don't actually really like doing it this way for the most part. Not all companies, but a lot of clients don't like to do it that way because it's a surprise. You owe 15 grand this month versus 7. Right? Just because you asked us to do more work this time. And so once we kind of stopped doing as much work for that client and started doing a lot more of the lump sum pricing, it became a very different story. And we had to learn very quickly how to manage a real budget and figure out how much time it actually took us to do projects.
I'm going off of what we had, the issues we face, where we're at now. Was it kind of a learning curve for the people that were on your team? Was it a struggle for them to figure out, like, hey, I only have this many hours to get this done, so whether I feel like this is polished enough or not, this is all we have? Was that difficult for them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's difficult for anyone, whether junior designer all the way up to creative director. I think figuring out how to create beautiful work within any sort of budget, that is always going to be the tension in the budget and within the deadline. That's always, that is always what we are up against as creatives and agencies. So yes, it was. It's always going to be a learning curve, and you just have to know, the more you do it, you just get better at it, right? And so you just have to know when to stop. Like, okay, this idea is the idea, and we just have to run with it, right? So as we got better at it, my dearest of a husband is a financial planner, as we've talked about and had him on the show before. And he is so smart and such a money and business savvy human that I asked for him to help me kind of figure out how do we budget and how do we figure out how much time we can spend on these different projects. And so he created this very fancy Excel spreadsheet. And it was great. He highlighted in the Excel spreadsheet all the places that I was supposed to input my things. So it was like, put your budget for the full dollar amount that you are getting from the client, put that here. And it was highlighted in green. And then it was like, put however many hours you're supposed to be working, put it here, so that we could keep track on these Excel spreadsheets of things like our profit or things like margins. And he had it all automated so that we would end up finding out how much profit we would make at the end of the day. The thing is that he is much better at budgets and mathing.
What she's trying to say was that the spreadsheets were not pretty enough.
I mean, that is definitely part of it. And then also there were so many of them because you have like 55 different Excel spreadsheets you have to keep up every week because you have to input updates and all that stuff. And so it was insanely cumbersome, as well as it would just get super complicated because we'd have some clients who were hourly, some clients who were paying monthly, some clients who were paying lump sum, but then we were paying contractors and employees. And it was like, this is so complicated. How do we manage this? And it's just like, holy freaking crap. This is crazy. My brain just does not function in that world. And so that ended up not working out. Those little Excel spreadsheets of budgets, it was just like, I can't do it. But we did do that for a couple of years.
For anyone listening, we use Harvest as our budget tracking platform. At what point in time did we take that shift over to that?
I don't know. I think that was you. I did it.
I'm pretty sure Harvest was already in place before I got here.
Well, we've used it for time tracking since the dawn of DayCloud time. But for tracking budget systems, I think you were a part of that.
Okay. I remember the spreadsheets. Okay, you're right. You were right. I was a part of that process of shifting into it. Like you, I completely blocked that portion of DayCloud from my mind.
See, guys? So we are still working on doing a good job at our budget. So there you go. Obviously, keeping track of things manually is incredibly inefficient, and it's honestly just not doable. Like, it's just not feasible because things go so fast. We have so many projects going on any given day, and we are a small agency, and we all wear a ton of hats, and so it's just not feasible for an agency our size. And so what we ended up doing is using our time tracking platform called Harvest. They track time. They allow for reporting and invoicing and tracking expenses, as well as sending estimates and stuff. And so what we've done is inside a specific project, there's a spot for you to say, here's the budget that we have for this project. And then you can drop in, here's this expense, like our development is going to cost this much. So here's how much development is going to be. Our design is going to cost this much. Here's how much design is going to be. And then it just subtracts all those amounts for you, keeps track of the work that we input because we're time tracking in there as well. And so it just keeps track of all of it for you.
And it allows you to break things up as far as tasks in a specific project, whether that's design, copywriting, web development, or whatever, project managing. We have tasks within Harvest that help us track specifically what kind of job is being done. That's obviously going to be flexible and different for every company. Whether you have contractors that charge you just a flat rate, they probably won't be in that system, but it also has the option to add expenses where we actually currently put our contractors as an expense under that project. So everything still is being monitored and tracked. It's just more tech savvy now than it used to be.
Yeah. And so the other thing is they have different ways of billing for a project. So it allows for hourly billing. It allows for lump sum billing. It allows for monthly billing. And so all of that stuff is built in there already. So the systems are in place already. We just have to drop in our numbers. And so it makes it much easier, much more automated. And then all we have to do on our end is figure out how much profit that we want to take home for the business. That is something that we have also had to work on a lot over the years, because I know this is like business 101 for so many people, but for the longest time, early on in DayCloud years, I didn't know that you were supposed to upcharge on things like printing for your clients, or when people went through you for vendors and stuff, that you're supposed to upcharge on that. And I would just tell the clients the exact cost of whatever the printer was charging me for the piece, instead of giving a 15, 20, whatever it was. It was just one of those things where like,
you were just gifting work left and right.
And it was just one of those things where I didn't go to business school. I went to fine art school. So I just didn't think about that kind of stuff. I was just like, well, this is what it costs, so that's what you're going to pay. Never thought about it. And then, of course, I eventually wisened up. And then, of course, eventually those numbers started to go up as well. It used to be like 20%, and now it's 40%. And so now our general rule for certain things is the least amount of margin that we have is 40%. Sometimes on things, we do 100% margin, just depending on what the project is, what the service is that we're providing. It just kind of depends on what it is. But we are always adding margin because if nothing else, it's simply for the service of communicating with the vendor, having to deal with their invoice, taking on the fee, like we have to pay the vendor and then carry that cost until the client pays us for it.
There's always random expenses that come into play when you're handling something for somebody, whether it's that credit card fee or whether it is some small edit that comes back that's slightly out of scope, but it's within that gray area and we just decide to do it. And I mean, it helps us cover our tails when it comes to our employees too, paying their salary. It helps us ride the rough times throughout our business season so we can stay open, so we can keep our people on staff, so that we can do good by our clients and we have that cushion to do good by them.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So one of the other things we do is if we're to do like a social media advertising campaign. So we charge 15% for the media buy. So let's say they were to spend $10,000 on media buy for a social campaign. We would take 15% of that $10,000 and that would immediately go to us. But then the creative for that campaign would be in addition to the $10,000. So just keeping that in mind whenever you're talking about any sort of digital ad campaigns. If someone is buying media, you have to charge a fee for the actual media buy because you have to distribute it. You have to manage it. You have to run the campaign ongoing. You have to pull reports and all those things. And so someone has to be managing and maintaining that digital media, the ads that are going up. But then you also have to build in all the creative and all the content and all the strategy and all that stuff. So that's in addition to the actual media buy. So just keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about budgeting out some of that stuff.
Well, to add on to that, we also value being very transparent with our clients and with our customers, especially in the contracts that we send over, making sure that the deliverables and scope is mapped out really clearly. And some things that other agencies might do or other people might do is that they would do that 10K and then they would take their management fee out of that, whatever that percentage may or may not be, but they don't tell the client. And what a lot of customers or clients of marketing agencies, they don't know that this is happening. But if they do find out, they might be mad and they might be upset and they might feel like it's a kind of a shady situation. And so at least at our agency, we value being very transparent about what's going on, where their money's going, why there's a percentage markup because of all the things that have to go on our side of things, and the communication just to get one project set up, even if it's going to run throughout the campaign and be checked up on monthly or whatever that time frame looks like. So I would say that it's a good piece of advice for anybody is to be very transparent in what people are paying for. And I think that'll reduce your troubles in the long run.
That's a really good point. And also, to keep in mind that you take 15% from the 10,000. You don't do 15% on top of the 10,000. The client's budget is 10 grand for media buy. So then you take 15% from that. So, okay. So then the other thing would be traditional media buy. So let's say your client is like, hey, I want to buy a billboard through you guys. Can you help me do that? We say yes. So then for traditional media, it's industry standard to charge 20%. So that's what we would do. So let's say you're buying a billboard, bus benches, whatever it is, you would charge for doing the creative, the copywriting, all the content for it. And then you would also charge an additional 20% in addition to the actual media buy. The buying the billboard, buying the whatever it is. So it's a little bit different how we do that. Just keeping that in mind. Because a lot of times a billboard is a set price or a bus bench is a set price. And with traditional media, it's a little bit more because it's just how it's set up. With digital, it's less because it's not as much to do.
And then on the project management side, for these type of projects, just to go back to set the scene for this, is like when we do set up these projects and we look into the budget, we break it down for how much time each person has for each specific role of this project. We make sure to communicate that clearly with, especially our designers. As creatives, it's just natural to want to go over time to make sure that what you're producing is quality.
Yeah.
And clearly communicating from the start of the project is so vital for the success of that project that, hey, you only have 10 hours to get this done as a designer. This is the full scope of the project, but this is all you have. This includes edits. This includes time to review with Liz, who's the CCO, Chief Creative Officer, CCO, but also for you to do the work. And so it's not like I have 10 hours for design for me to make this stuff, but then I have extra time on top for the edits and the review. It's like cumulative. It's all within that block of time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that has been a challenge for us is for designers to understand that clearly that this is all you have. This is the total amount. This isn't just a piece of just what you're doing for work. You have other things that are going to end up kind of pushing that time out of scope in the long run. So just be aware of it.
That's a really good point. So the way that I like to think about this is, let's say we have a $10,000 budget for something and we're like, okay, so we like to have a 40% margin. Right away, we would take $4,000 off the top of that. And then the rest of that is $6,000, right? So $6,000 would be the rest of our budget to actually have for doing the project. So you would have $6,000 for design, for content, for management, for meetings with the clients, client relationships. All that should fall in that $6,000 because the rest of it is what you need to be able to take home as profit margin for your business, right? Because we still have to make money. Again, we're not a charity. We are in the business of making money. So that $6,000 is where you need to start if you want a 40% profit margin, which is what we really should be trying to hit as a business, right? To your point, Chelsea, you break that down into different departments, essentially, which would be creative gets this much, content gets this much, and then our admin and meetings and client relations gets this much, right? And so you kind of break that apart depending on if it's a content heavy, then content gets more. If it's really design focused, they get more, whatever it is. And so then it's our job to say, okay, team, this is how much we all get. And then it's the team's job. Let's say the designer, like you said, gets 10 hours. It's 10 hours for the whole project. It's 10 hours for reviews, edits, the initial design, the edited design, all that stuff. And with our team, we expect them to be self-managers, meaning
be self-aware.
Yes, meaning that they need to be able to manage their time and be adults enough to know, like, I need to do this project in 6 hours so that I have 4 hours left for edits and design reviews with Liz. And so that's an expectation that we have for our team to be able to manage their time well enough within the budget that we give them. So that's a big piece of how we run the office.
Yeah. And I would say this phase of managing your budget is one of the biggest and most important pieces of it, because if you set your project up for success long before the project begins, everything should run smoothly. If you're doing all of the things, you're providing your resources to your team, you're providing the assets, the budget, the timeline, how much time they have for all these things, you're logging it accordingly into the platforms that you're using, whatever that may be. Doing all of that work up front is going to lead to a successful project down the road.
Yeah.
It's not saying that you aren't still going to touch in on those type of things and be like, where are we at in budget, just to assess and bring it to people's attention. If they are going way over budget, that needs to be a conversation you have with your employee. A lot of times it's just being like, hey, we're really close to this and we only have about 10% left of that budget for you to use. We need to be really cognizant of how much time you're spending on these edits and how much time you're spending on finalizing these files, because that always takes a long time. Packaging these files always takes a long time. And if it's a client that always sends robust edits, that's obviously going to eat up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
And you're going to gauge that per client. And so just being cognizant of it, like a lot of the work's going to happen up front, and touching in throughout the entirety of the project is going to be key.
Yeah. And something that I always forget when building out a budget for us, I always forget this part, is how much time we actually have to spend with the client. Like how much time we have to meet and communicate with the client. Just how much time that actually takes. Because I'm like, design, we got it. Content, we got it. Development, yes. And then I forget that it's like 16 hours of meeting time, because we have 3 people in every meeting, and that's 3 hours for every meeting. It's not 1 hour, it's 3 hours. And so I always forget, oh my gosh, that is tripled every time. That is something I'm terrible at budgeting. It just goes way out of control, when I'm thinking about budgets.
That's the beauty of both of our roles working in tandem, is that we communicate in the beginning of a project to talk about these type of things. Yeah. But I mean, sometimes there are things that happen like that where you're like, oops, I didn't think about this, or oops, I didn't realize how difficult
skip that step.
I didn't realize how difficult of a client this one was going to be. So I should have built in more time on our end, a cushion for that. Yeah.
But we should have added the PETA fee here. You got to explain what that fee is.
Pain in the ass fee. Pain in the ass fee. It's a difficult fee.
It's the PETA fee. Yeah.
PETA fee in the nicest way. I had to think about it. I was like, PETA, animals.
Sorry.
But
go ahead.
No, one example comes to mind of you and I working in tandem on that budget side of things is within those meetings, like usually it is 3 persons minimum, depending on if it's a discovery meeting or a different type of meeting. Yeah. But you and I always are kind of in a push-pull battle of who needs to be in those meetings. Yeah. Because
is it you? Is it? Yeah.
I'm always like, who can we cut from this meeting so there's less people? And you're always like, you're like, everyone should be in there.
You can all come. Everybody should come. I don't want to have to tell people about this meeting. That's usually my whole thing, is like, how do I not have to communicate this over again?
Yeah. And I'm always like, well, if we do that, then we're wasting this much money and everybody's time is worth something. And I was like, so-and-so gets the cut. They don't get to come to this meeting. I'm sorry. Nothing personal, but keep it.
But like, no.
It's kind of personal.
It's absolutely.
You're not important to this meeting.
You didn't make the budget cut here. Yeah.
But even with you and I are like, do I need to be in this meeting?
Oh God.
And sometimes you just ask me to be in it just so we're all on the same page. Because I mean, communication breaks down on any type of team.
See?
And I get it. But some of them I'm like, I don't need to be here.
Some of them I can tell you're just not even listening. I'm like, oh God.
I'm listening to all of them. I might be multitasking, but I am absolutely listening.
Chelsea, there's no such thing as multitasking.
Multitasking, taking notes. Sometimes when they say things, I'm looking up documents they sent us just to cover our asses. Like a lot of the time, it is me just covering our asses mid-meeting just to make sure we have everything in line. Moving things in Dropbox to where they need to be. Setting up our status documents. Is that updated?
We said we were going to do.
Are the milestones correct? And so usually it's me going in and being like, are these milestones correct? Let me check teamwork. Let me check harvest. Let me check all of these things while we're here just to make sure that we are on point. Or if it's a kickoff meeting and you're leading the way, I'll already be drafting my email just so I do not forget the recap.
That's smart.
So if you think I'm not listening, 99% of the time, I am just doing the prep work make sure.
You're not.
99% of the time, I don't listen any of the time.
Literally what you just told me. What you just told me is you are not listening, which is fine.
Hold on. You're not giving enough credit. You're not giving enough credit to women in general being able to multitask.
Okay, I said nothing about women.
This is a different topic for a different day, but I feel targeted.
Well, I am 100% targeting you because I'm literally talking to you. But 1, you're not listening. 2, that's okay because you're doing your job. So, you know what? It's fine. Good for you, Chelsea.
Thank you for your grace and your mercy in this situation. Thank you.
I think I just realized that we need a different note taker for these meetings is actually, I think.
I'm usually taking notes, but I don't like taking notes. Not when we have 5 other people there. I, as a project manager, yes, I would love to take notes. But also I think that our designers absolutely need to be taking notes. They're the ones making the edits. And if they're in the meeting and if that meeting ends and down the road they ask me what the edits are, I will absolutely be like, hey, you were in that meeting and you were the one in charge of those design. Like our team is small enough that I personally feel like every person should be taking their form of notes, especially based on their role on the project.
Yeah, 100% agree, Chelsea.
Thank you.
You tell them.
Yeah. Do your job.
Do your job.
Do your job.
So back to the topic at hand.
Sorry, we went on a little rant.
No, that's great. I love it. So managing your budget, it can sneak up on you.
Very sneaky.
It is very sneaky. But I would say one thing that we do in the company when we are like, oh man, we are over budget or...
What's worst case scenario? Let's break it down. How do we handle it?
Well, yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking is like when it comes to the budget is blown and we still have work to do, there's criteria that I take into consideration. 1, how bad is the budget really blown? Are we a couple hours over? It's almost like a percentage. Is it like a 10%er or is it an 80%er or somewhere in between? How bad is the budget really? If it's like an 80% budget issue, then I'm guessing that something was out of scope by a massive amount, right? Or I did a really bad job scoping the project. It's one of those two things. Usually it's just bad management on my part of some kind, if it's that bad. Anyway, so if we're a little percentage over, 10, 20% over the budget, then it's depending on what type of client we're dealing with. This sounds terrible, but is it a high priority client? A well-known client? A
law firm that is well-known in the town? Or
I mean, kind of. Is it a big brand?
That type of client could really affect anybody's reputation and relationship within the community. There's politics in any business and any company, and it's not bad to say someone's a high priority client when they could make or break your career and they could make or break your year. Yeah,
exactly. And then the other criteria is also, do we just like them? You know, like, are they nice people? If they're nice people, then I'm going to do my absolute best. Even if it's a little bit extra, a little bit out of budget, a little bit out of scope, I'm going to be more likely to be a little more generous with them than I would somebody that I'm like, well, they're kind of
crappy.
Yeah, like they're kind of a jerk. So there's kind of my criteria for if we are over budget or close to over budget, if I'm going to really truly finish the project and still get after it or whatever. That's kind kind of my criteria for how I make that call.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it just goes back to clearly communicating. If it ever is to that 80% point, we've always had conversations internally, what kind of call we're going to make, whether that is telling them that we are beyond scope and that in order for us to complete the project,
telling the client or our team.
Our team, no matter what, at DayCloud, we finished the project. And that's just end game. But there's been examples in the past that we realized we were very close. And then we had to have discussions on what is out of scope. And then to extend an estimate for that work to the client. There's been examples of just us being communicative. I don't know if that's the right word, internally and externally in those situations.
Yeah, that's a good point. At the end of the day, we always finish the work for the client. Even if we are over budget, at the end of the day, if we're over budget, it's my fault. I didn't scope it right. We didn't manage our team right. Either way, always the buck stops with us. Unless it was the client did something out of scope. But then again, that would be our fault if we didn't tell them, hey, client, this is out of scope. We need to send you a new estimate. So it's on us to manage those things and manage the budget correctly and help manage our team in those ways. Now, of course, obviously there are outliers. Sometimes we have employees that just cannot hit a budget to save their life because they just are not built for agency pace.
Yeah. Also, there's like a learning curve within every organization when someone joins that is going to take them a bit longer to understand the process, understand what we're asking and what the expectations are. The first project, especially like web projects, if a designer hasn't hopped on a web project, their first project is about like 90% going to push the boundaries of that budget scope. Yeah. And that's the one that we really have to be cognizant and communicate internally on. We're like, hey, we know that this is a learning curve. And in order for you to make this the quality that it needs to be, we need you to know that we understand that this is what we're going. But it is a fine line that we are walking. Yes, you're allowed a little leniency here, but at the end of the day, we have to make money on this project. And you cannot go further than this.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. That is such a good point because when we do have new employees, we always expect them to go over budget a little bit on a brand new project that they don't know our processes or something. Now, we don't want that, but it is something that happens more often than not. And we are more gracious about it, but we don't let it happen. You know,
this is unacceptable for your next project.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, you did it once.
Don't do it twice.
Now we're done. That's good. Now we need you to perform. So that's a good point. I'm so glad you said that.
Go team.
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of covers managing your budget. It's going to look a little bit different for every organization or whatever stage in your business you are. And I mean, because it goes in tandem with the managing your team, there's going to be a lot of different variables, but that's kind of how we do it. We are constantly adapting. We're constantly trying to be better in our process. And this isn't perfect. We're not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but we are constantly trying to do better by our clients and do better with ourselves and with the team members that we have on board at DayCloud. So if you're a follower and you like this episode, like, share, follow. If you are loving this series, please let us know. If you guys would like to learn more about the technical side of agency life, we just would love to hear any type of feedback that you guys have for us. And peace out. Thanks for joining.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.